thus far. We are excited that you have selected to attend our session. And today we're going to take you on a little voyage. So before we get going, we just want to meet everyone. We're going to introduce ourselves first, and then we're going to have breakout rooms so that we can get to know everyone who is in the session today. So I am Catrina. I'm a doctoral student at Rutgers Business School, and I'll be defending my dissertation soon. So soon becoming Dr. Johnson. Michelle and Pooja, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Michelle Montague-Mfuni, and I'm a fifth-year PhD candidate at the University of Virginia. Oh, Virginia, sorry. You know, Massachusetts now, Memphis. Where am I? Who am I? And I also just want to give a shout out to Dr. Preston, who's part of our contributors, who just received her PhD, also from the University of Memphis this morning, just before we started. So we're very excited for that.
Hi, I'm Pooja. I'm a third-year PhD student at Preston University. And this is my third MOBTS. So this was the first conference that I ever attended, and I hope to continue to do so. So welcome, everyone.
All right, great. Since we have a nice crowd today, we're going to just do some small breakout rooms just so we can all get to know one another today. These breakout rooms are going to continue throughout our session, where we're going to experiment with some case studies, some role playing, and get our foot wet with some international negotiation. So in a breakout room, if you can, just share your name, your affiliation, and any experience you have had with negotiation, teaching negotiation, and even any experience with teaching international negotiation. All right. So Pooja, going to get us started here.
How many breakout rooms do we want?
Well, let's see. It looks like there's 20 people. Mm-hmm. So let's have maybe 5 or 6 breakouts rooms.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
We do have a comment from Suzanne. Is the intent of this session for newbies? So we will be broadly going over international negotiation from a very broad general perspective. So if you do have experience with international negotiation, you may be more of an expert in this session rather than those who may not have experience teaching it.
Okay, so should we keep the rooms for like 5 minutes or more?
5 minutes sounds perfect. Shouldn't be more than that. Just say your name, your school, and if you've taught international negotiations.
Perfect. So I'm opening the rooms. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you could put us in the group too, so we can help those groups that we're in.
Okay, great. So let me put you all in groups too. All right, I'm opening the rooms now.
All right, great. So I had a great breakout session. We have some dynamic people here in our sessions, some who come with some great practitioner experience and also extensive classroom experience, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. Before we get started, I'm just going to kind of provide you with the overview of our objectives today. Basically, we're going to talk about the uniqueness of international negotiation and the important components of the cultural awareness. We're going to use COBE experimental learning theory as our guiding framework today. And so in doing this, we're going to provide you with some video case studies and then also do a role-playing exercise to kind of reinforce what we learned and how you may be able to use these examples in your own classroom experience. So with all of our amazing participants, I know that you broadly understand what negotiation is. As the art of 2 or more parties engage in dialogue with the aim of reaching a mutual agreement over one or more issues. So while in theory, the outcome may be beneficial for all parties involved, it's not necessarily the case. But specifically with international negotiations, which is the primary focus of our presentation today, it's going to be unique because we're going to really be talking about these cultural differences. So factors such as individual versus collective cultures, hierarchical versus egalitarian societies, and specifically time orientation, and how that all contributes to cross-cultural differences and how we go about interacting with others. So it's similar to teaching negotiations, case studies and role playing are strongly recommended activities just to get students actually involved and understanding what it means to have that interaction. So it provides you with that experiential learning experience. And performing some of the negotiation strategies such as FATNA or even ZONA, we use these same practices in international case studies, but the underlying factor is bringing that regional context and including the cultural differences. So our guiding framework today is going to be Kolb's experiential learning theory. You may all be familiar with this. Basically, Kolb's learning style just really emphasize this experiential learning aspect, the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. And so in his model, he emphasized the experience of knowledge construction through two different phases. The first phase walk us through a 4-stage cycle, and the second phase walk us through these learning styles. And so we're going to walk you through these 4-stage cycles today with this hands-on experience. So we're going to walk you through the 4-stage cycle now. So how are we going to do this today? So through our voyage, we're going to provide you with 2 visual negotiation case studies to develop concrete learning experience for the specific international negotiation cases. And then we're going to lead the workshop participants through a guided reflection on these 2 case studies. And we're going to also do a compare and contrast of these 2 different case studies. And then we're going to break out into another small groups to do some role-playing activities. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first video case study.
Just give me a minute while I transition here.
Sure.
So we'll ask you to pay attention because there is now going to be a participative session comparing and contrasting these case studies.
Okay. You're able to see the video screen?
Yep.
Meet Jean, a professor who taught in the United States and decided to take a year sabbatical to write and research in France. Jean brought her family, including her 2 school-age children. Jean's children attended a French school that had a few other children from America. Inspired by the national diversity in his classroom, the French teacher talked to Jean about a Halloween party for the students, including lots of treats and, of course, pumpkin carving into jack-o'-lanterns. Jean offered to buy the pumpkins for the class. However, unlike the United States, where pumpkins are easily accessible in the fall, Jean had a tough time finding the pumpkins in France. Jean looked high and low and started to feel defeated that she wouldn't be able to find the pumpkins. Far out in the country, Jean came across a farm stand that had pumpkins. Jean asked to buy all of the pumpkins, but the farmer refused. Jean had limited options and thought, what can I do to change her mind? Offer more payment? Ask the farmer how many pumpkins she would be willing to sell? Explain to the farmer why she needed all of the pumpkins? Or ask the farmer, why not sell me all of your pumpkins? Jean decided to go with the latter and asked the farmer, why not sell me all of your pumpkins? Just in case the farmer would not reveal her reasons for refusing to sell all of the pumpkins, Jean planned to ask, under what circumstances would you sell me all of your pumpkins? This would push the farmer into making her an offer. The farmer revealed that if she sold all of her pumpkins, she would not have any seeds to plant for the next year. Jean revealed how the pumpkins would be used for the school-age children to make jack-o'-lanterns. Jean also offered to return all of the seeds to the farmer the following week if she would sell her all the pumpkins. The farmer thought for a minute and agreed to sell all of the pumpkins in return for the seeds. Both parties were able to achieve what they wanted out of the negotiation.
Thank you, Pooja.
I believe it was hard to hear for some people, but let's say.
Okay, so just open up the discussion. What did you guys observe in this specific video?
Well, it's a pretty good example of how you have to look at interests underneath positions.
Mm-hmm. Each party had value in going beyond what your immediate need is, but understanding how both can actually expand the pie, right? In that activity, absolutely.
And due to the availability of pumpkins in the United States, she had no clue that there would be that the farmer would have even begin to have a problem not having seeds for next year.
Right. Yes, that's an observation. What strategies did you guys see in place?
Asking questions.
Asking questions. Mm-hmm. So not just worry about your own interests, but also understanding what is the value to the other party. Mm-hmm. Any other takers? Is there anything that would you have done differently if you were the farmer or the professor?
I think if I was the farmer, I probably would have sold her all but one.
Mm.
This way I was assured of having enough seed, whether or not she returned it or not, because yeah, I'm Canadian, so I know you can't trust Americans.
So you need the security. Not going to totally rely on the other party to bring you back. I see that. So Suzanne said, "What did I have a hard time buying Thanksgiving turkey in Switzerland over here in the?"
No, my point was because holidays are culturally relative.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the assumptions that she made that, oh, you know, have this holiday here, let's buy a bunch of pumpkins.
Right.
She might have asked around a little bit before going to the farmer.
Yes. Yep. So that cultural context, right? In terms of what the pumpkin means in American with Halloween, and being totally irrelevant in a whole.
And I imagine, having spent time in France and a lot of time in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, that had she approached the farmer in French, she probably would have had, you know, a better reception.
Mm.
She did approach the farmer in French. I know the story. She has lived in France for a long time.
Mm.
So she knew the culture, she knew it, but you know, you wouldn't know that from seeing the video.
Yeah.
Bien sûr.
And sometimes even when you know the culture though, if someone else perceives you as being different,
right,
it doesn't make a difference as someone who's spent half her life living in a country that's not my native country.
Actually, just to finish the story that Kat, you mentioned that I put in the text, when I ordered my Thanksgiving turkey while living in Switzerland, and a few days before, the butcher at the grocery store called me to say in French, sorry, we can't get the one that you want, you know, 8 kilograms or something like that. How about a couple chickens? You know, for them, it was like, those are substitutes, right? And
right.
we were, yeah, it was a good French speaking experience. I had to learn to respond in French without the benefit of social cue, you know, the body language.
Right. Their alternative was chicken was just fine.
Yeah, you want one big turkey or two smaller chickens? Yeah.
Nice.
Le même, no?
Michelle, did you want to add anything to this case before we move over to another case that's going to be completely different from what we just seen?
It is completely different. And no, I think I have nothing to add. Pooja, do you want me to take the screen for the two, my two little slides before the movie? Or are you gonna, it doesn't matter. I have them ready.
It doesn't matter, so.
Okay, let me go ahead and try to share those then. Sorry. Listen. Okay, can you all see? Oops. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so these, as you can see, are not cases that we have developed ourselves. They are existing cases. This next case that we're going to give you is from our new, or our colleague, Dr. Preston. And so we will admit up front that the three of us that are here with you today, none of us are history buffs. So I thought, well, I better, do some homework just to kind of get you ready for the next video, because it's not a cartoon video and it's a historic video. I was not a history major. I was a biochemistry major in college. So I tell you all that, but let me tell you what some things, some facts, and just to get you in the right frame of mind for the next video. So if you look on the left-hand side here, it's a picture of the Japanese Empire. And it shows from in 1870 was in red, right? And then it shows a couple of acquisitions, if you will, in pink that were made in 1932, then more in yellow in 1937, and then the purples came in 1942. And so Japan was, for lack of a better word, taken over, Asia. And then the Japanese Empire abruptly collapsed in August of 1945. So related to the war. And in late 1945, US President Harry Truman sent General George Marshall as a special presidential envoy to China. So that's George Marshall here in the middle here. And he's negotiating a unity government between China. So this is the Nationalist Party representative and the Communist Party representative. And this picture is a famous picture called the Committee of Three. And the US interest really in getting involved was to stop the encroachment of the Soviet Union, the Cold War efforts. And over a year in these negotiations, no agreements were really reached. And so the next video is narrated by Dr. Preston, and she'll discuss this event further and highlight some of the things that I've also told you. But listen carefully as we will analyze this case study and then do a compare and contrast. So just give me 2 seconds. I'm going to prime our video. And I know some of you said you were having problems with the sound. Let's see. I have it at 100%. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this.
Called It Ain't Over Till It's Over.
Got it.
Purpose is this historical story demonstrates the difficulties in international negotiations. Our lesson today is that details can derail negotiations. Even when the decision makers participate in the negotiations, external forces can negatively influence the progress. As reflected in the years after World War II, the end of war does not mean the beginning of peace. Rather than a binary condition of war or peace, the progression towards peace includes successfully negotiating unrest and power vacuums that erupt as a war ends. World War II ended in 1945. China's civil war resumed with Japan's retreat and ultimate surrender. The nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, battled the communists, led by Mao Zedong, for control of China. Recognizing China's pivotal role in establishing stability in East Asia, U.S. President Truman asked General George C. Marshall to broker a peace agreement between Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. By mediating a peace agreement, Truman sought China as a post-World War II ally. Miraculously, Marshall convinced Chiang and Mao to agree to a democratic-style government within his first few weeks in China. Across the globe, Marshall was heralded as a master negotiator. Yet just a few years after Mao and Marshall toasted peace and friendship, Mao led the communists to subjugate China, forcing Chiang to flee to Taiwan. Despite bringing the leaders to negotiate an important deal with clear objectives and a highly respected mediator, the negotiations failed. How did the seemingly successful negotiation fail? One contributing factor, details. While Chiang and Mao agreed to broad concepts, Marshall was unable to negotiate details agreeable to both leaders. Second, threatened by democracy in China, Stalin flipped from supporting Marshall's mediation to actively encouraging Mao to take China by force.
Okay, sorry about the sound. Can you hear me? You can. Okay, I tried everything to see if I could get the sound a little bit higher there. I do know it was low. So those of you that could hear it, my first question, even if you couldn't hear it that well, are negotiation skills enough in a negotiation? Why not? Why or why not?
Need to close the deal.
You need to close the deal. So you can have a smooth operator, but if you can't close the deal, it's not.
And there's too many hidden things going on. I mean, they shake hands, they have drinks, they all smile for the camera. Everybody's, sitting around looking like everything's great, but in the back of their mind going, I don't trust this guy. As soon as I'm going to pull a knife and be done with it. Yeah.
Exactly.
If you look at,
It's just like a car salesman. They're gonna tell you just enough to get you to buy that car. And the same thing with like those three countries. Tell you just enough.
also, if you look at the bargaining zone model, sometimes there's no zone of potential agreement. There's not overlapping interests. So that, as good of a negotiator as you may be, because the interests don't overlap and you're not able to build any bridges to overlap those interests, a negotiation might not be successful.
I like what Neil said in the fact that the beginning of the clip said it's not binary. War is not necessarily peace, and peace is not necessarily war. And so concentric circles, just because you got one doesn't mean you have the other. I mean, you've got to find the middle ground between them all.
What I was going to say, trust is a huge factor. You've got the letter of the agreement and the spirit of the agreement. And how do I feel about this negotiating partner? If I don't trust that they're going to fulfill their part of the bargain, then why should I fulfill mine? So it's this kind of game of chicken, or to quote the first slide, it ain't over till it's over.
I need to ask a question. You started off by saying, are negotiation skills enough? And my question to that would be, what do you define as negotiation skills?
Very good.
Because part of me says that if we have if we have this theoretical thing called really good negotiating skills, should we not be able to tap into those issues along the way? I don't define negotiation skills as simply getting somebody to agree with you. I think it's more than that. All those other hidden things. And all those other, things that have to be done to make sure that what they agree with are real, all those undertakings. How do we ensure those things happen? What surprises aren't going to happen? I guess it requires a bit of anticipation of all the possible things that could go wrong.
I want to add something that caught my attention, and this is a question for you guys. Is this second case also for business students? Because if
Yes.
so, here's what I see. The negotiations in diplomacy consider certain variables that may be a little bit different than maybe the negotiations in business, because in the business side, there tend to be an economic factor that trigger the intention of getting something for something. On the other side, when we are talking about diplomacy is more based on different interests that may not necessarily be exactly the same. There's again, there's the intention of convincing the other to reach an agreement, but I consider that there are different variables. One is more based on economics, while the other one is more based perhaps in well-being, if we could use that. I don't know what it will be the right term.
I love the spirit of what you're saying. The cynic in me has a strong disagreement that I think everything has an economic basis behind it, particularly in this case. And when I was trying to do the homework and understanding sort of the history behind it, who won and who didn't, the US, was looking at Hong Kong and Malaysia, the French were looking for Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. So there was and they weren't doing this out of the spirit of, any kind of well-being. There was an economic base behind it of why the folks were involved. So, but I love the conversation and the talk, because one of the things that I talk about a lot in class, and I'd love to hear your perspective, Carlos, and the rest of you, is that government and business are particularly when you're dealing with cross-border, is very closely aligned. Even, you want to make that deal, yes, but you better understand what's happening between your countries, that, where your home base is, and what those relations are, because it's going to affect your economic negotiation at the business level, at least in my experience. But I'd love to hear others' opinion on that.
No, and just to respond to that, and at least that's why in diplomacy you tend to have trade people that focus only in the economic part of relationships and trade on between countries, and the diplomacy goes in. And one, as you said, yes, one may be the ultimate intention, but in negotiations in between countries, when there is an intention of trade, is a straightforward trade. Well, in this case, I believe there was a political thing hidden or covering maybe perhaps that ultimate intention of what are we going to keep, what do you want to lose?
Fair enough. I will add in, just like I would do in my class, share a grandma story. One of my many jobs that I had in South Africa was I was the head of the California Trade and Investment Office. And we had a large California multinational, I can't remember which one now, but one of the tech companies that wanted to donate computers to this education. So they sent me, I still am technically South African based, and to go and to the Department of Education. And they were so skeptical. And in my mind, I was so young and so naive back then. I thought, why don't they want to take these? Here they're trying to do something good, and at the country level. And so now I'm getting caught up in the motion and forgetting the point that you said, Carlos, that I wanted to make. But basically, sometimes, that was a company. Well, maybe it was company to government, so maybe that is slightly different. But the deal was not as straightforward as I thought it would be. I didn't expect it to be a negotiation.
We could see it right now with the COVID vaccines. I mean, think about what countries are accepting donations of certain vaccines compared to others. You don't have to go that far. Venezuela has said thanks, but no thanks for any US help. But all the vaccines that have been used in Venezuela are the Russian one. So that gives you an idea that there is certain agenda there that is more in the political arena than anything else.
Yes, and I guess that was the point I was trying to make, is that I just, in my personal experience, I found that when you're dealing with cross-border, that political plays a much stronger role, and you must be aware of what those issues are, even if it's not directly related to your case. To move on with.
I was just going to say, you know, Carlos brought up an interesting comment, and I'm just wondering, would this negotiation have worked out better if they had immediately had some form of trade going on with it, instead of just saying we like each other, let's just stay liking each other for next however many years? If they had immediately began doing something back and forth, so that I can see that you will hold up your end of the bargain, and you'll see that I'll end up, you know, we actually have some kind of quid pro quo going back and forth, whether it's trade or whatever. But just simply saying, let's have peace, you know, I just wonder if it could have turned out differently, if there'd been more things happening that could happen immediately back and forth.
Great. Point well taken. The other, so you answered actually, so what could the Marshal, my next question was, what could the Marshal have done to broker a more enduring peace? So I think you tapped right into that question. How about, is agreement enough? That's one of the, having spent half my life in a country that is not my native country and had people tell me yes, and I think, oh, great, we got what we wanted. And then they tell me yes, but yet nothing changes. Is that agreement enough to have the two parties just say they agree in something?
Yeah. Love with actions.
And then the third thing that we wanted to show in this case, and I think also you mentioned COVID, what was the other, someone else mentioned another current example. Even I was watching news yesterday and thought, oh, if I do this with my class, I'd love to try to take some of the news clips of Biden and Putin, and relate that back, to this case in particular. But what about third parties and how they influence negotiations? So here, the US and China relations weren't that great, in the first place. So from what I've read, I'm not a history buff, but I do know what it's like to be an outsider trying to help two insiders do something. There's sort of like this, who does she think she, when I'm involved, who does she think she is? This American woman coming in here telling us, how we're doing things. And so I just wonder what others thought about that in terms of third parties and having external third parties and the influence in negotiations.
I also put in at least a week on third-party interventions in my negotiation class, because I think it's critical. It's probably, as future business people, they're going to be doing more mediation than anything else, getting involved, in between colleagues and things like that. So I think of it as a very healthy thing. And in this situation, it just brings me right back to Jimmy Carter and Camp David, and, makes me wonder, even Mark's question earlier about would something else have made it stick better? It made me wonder, why the Camp David Accord worked as well as it did for as long as it did.
Do you have certain techniques, Cindy, that you've used with your class in terms of to help the intermediaries?
I recommend the students to read about the study of triads by George Simmel. And usually you are able to identify there where there are certain mediators or moderators in the relationship, or those that just get benefit for the structural holes on between them. So in other words, individuals that financially capitalize from the lack of information on both sides. So that usually helps them to understand a better picture of that. Not everyone that bring you to the table is willing to help to be nice. Okay. There's people that have different agendas, even the negotiators. Even when you use arbitrage, the arbitrator they tend to have an economic interest because they want to do it good, because they want to keep making money on using their services.
Exactly.
The study is George Simmel. Yeah, I'll send it to you in a second.
Oh yeah, that'd be great, because I definitely wrote that down as something I'd like to use. Okay, let's see now. Pooja, I think you're gonna take over while I prepare for and try to break it. Now I know one of you said you're leaving early, so I'm gonna make you a negotiator, an observer in the role play. Is there anybody else that will be leaving early? Because I'm now, while Pooja will be speaking, I will be assigning you to various groups for the role play and explaining that.
Neil had to leave.
Neil, okay. But the rest of you are here with me. Great.
This is the fun part, right? About teaching negotiation is somebody says, oh, I'm not going to be there tomorrow.
So Pooja, talk slow while I'm assigning folks.
This is Amanda. I'd like to be an observer, please.
Okay.
Thank you. And it looks like OJ does too from the chat.
Ah, okay, I missed that. Thank you.
Oops. Okay.
Cindy, how many times have you played a role when someone else didn't show up?
Never.
Really?
Never. I just, I bundle them.
One thing I do is, I miss out on the opportunity to walk around and take notes, but I also have a TA that I often work with. But I love the look on their face when I go, hey, Cindy, you're with me. And they're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But I've had so much experience at this that I will adapt my behavior to be just beyond their capability. Not over, but like, okay, I want to stretch you a little bit so I could be really good, or I could be, just come across as a newbie. So I love doing it, actually.
Yeah, well, this is a great discussion. And, in the same breath of what we were discussing, I think right now we can talk more about comparing both those cases. And I know we were doing that a little already, but let's focus in on comparing the first case, on the pumpkins, and then the second one, which was World War II negotiations. So, if you all could think of points that you noted of differences, both in the context, in the way of negotiations, or anything that comes up, let's just open up that discussion, so anybody who wants to go and mention some differences that they noticed.
Between the pumpkins?
Yes.
And
Between the
Chinese.
first case, yes.
Differences?
Well, I'm sure the World War II negotiations last a lot longer than the pumpkin one. That's just a couple minutes. That World War II one, because the folks negotiating probably wasn't the top people in each country. So they had to get what each person wants, go back and tell, then come back, so it was a long process on that one.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are too many factors to consider in the second one, and it's longer. Great, yeah. Anyone else?
I think in the pumpkin scenario, the person selling the pumpkins appeared more open to expressing their real needs, or maybe the person on the other side who was trying to buy the pumpkins was good at extracting what their real needs were, while the parties in the other case that we were watching, I think the participants the two parties were not really open, and probably that stemmed from a lack of trust, not willing to reveal their true underlying motivations. I mean, as the example goes, you got to try and peel the onion to get to the real root of it. And the second case that we watched, neither party was willing to do it, and it didn't seem like the parties were willing to make the effort to try and show they understood the other party. So this back and forth reciprocity happened, and I think that was a major difference. The whole dynamic obviously was different. And your point about having USA, American-based, excuse me, I'm Canadian too. There might be a certain degree of suspicion with an American mediator. What is that person's real underlying motivation in trying to get us to settle? And maybe that caused a roadblock in divulging true underlying needs as opposed to expressed agreement, which, as you mentioned, doesn't necessarily result in the outcome you want. Those were some of my observations.
And
Go ahead. Yes.
There were no photographs taken of the pumpkin incident. Books were not written about it. It was a relatively private situation. So so we're smiling, but I also mean that, there's no posturing. There's no need for posturing or spinning or whatever you want to call it.
Well, the World War II case is about war, stopping the war. So neither side wanted to show vulnerability, show weakness. So that was the biggest thing about that one. They didn't want to show weakness. And they're thinking about they're conceding or agreeing on something, they're showing weakness, and they didn't want to do that.
Yeah, I see Mark's hands up too. So Mark, would you want to add something?
Sure. This is probably simplistic, except to say that it was about details. I mean, in the pumpkin thing, it was, I want to buy pumpkins. I want to sell pumpkins. I mean, it was about as simple as that. All they had to do was figure out that piece of the pie. When it came to the World War II discussion, the details were deep and wide, and they never got to them apparently, but they were too many details for them to ever get through. So for it to be successful in the end.
So in other words, we could argue that as complex the problem is, the probability of more blur information or missing parts, it's higher. So I think for students, they tend to see the first scenario more linear, more simplistic, while the other one, the number of stakeholders involved, even the ones that we don't know, make it more complex to the rationale of what is the right or wrong.
Yes. And I mean, as all of you are processing this information, I hear some common themes too, with so many different contexts, like trust, where it was able to come or no, or the international aspect of it. So there was lack of information, but in one case, we were able to get that information, and in the other, it was very complex. The suspicion was really high and things like that. So, I mean, we are sort of involving ourselves in awesome reflective observation with two such different cases, but having common aspects as well. So yeah, thank you so much for engaging in that. And I see Michelle is sharing her screen. Oops, you're on mute, Michelle.
Okay, sorry about that. Didn't mean to quite pop in like that. Let's see if I can. Okay, can you all see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I think you've talked pretty much through this. I'm going to take you through an exercise that, again, I did not write. I found it and then I tailored it to something that I knew I could talk a little bit about. So it is a role play. Oh, you know what? I was quick to sign, but not quick to share with Pooja my assignment. sorry about that. I'll read it out loud and give you time and to do that in a second, Pooja. In fact, let me just go there now. Flip. Or not. Let's try again. Sorry, I just. So these are the teams I came up with. I know you can't see it. Give me 2 seconds just to share it again. Okay, so can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so now Pooja, while I'm talking them through this a little bit, so I'll give you some time, what I'd like you to do is set the first breakouts. And you see one team has 2 observers. I want all the sellers in one room, all the buyers in one room, and all the observers in another room.
Perfect. You got it.
Okay, so don't open it. You set it up, but don't let them go there yet. Let me just
I'm not
okay.
in a room. Michelle.
Who have I not put in a room?
Cindy.
Cindy, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
You know what we're gonna do?
I'm happy to share.
No. You are going to negotiate. We're gonna add a row below. There we go. We're gonna stick Cindy and OJ. Oops. Okay. Can you see what I'm typing, or did I lose you?
No,
right.
We can see it.
Okay. And then I don't know, one of my gals, which one wants to go in there? You,
Michelle, I think OJ needed to be an observer.
Oh, did OJ ask to be an observer?
Yeah, him and Amanda.
I think I missed that. I think you did tell me, even Amanda, and I still missed it. Okay, that's fine, because this will be even more fun. Which one of you do I get to pop the surprise on? Kat, you know I love you. There you go.
Well, we need to make Deb an observer too.
Who?
Deborah.
Oh, Deborah wants to be an observer. Okay. You guys, I love this. So the joy of when you're really teaching the class, what you get is what you get, right? They don't really have that pleasure, but we can do that. Sorry, hold on. Oops, there we go. And then here. Okay, now you both get to do it, and you can tell me if you like my case study or not. I think that's fine, because I'm doing the rest of the talking for the rest of the time. Am I correct? Okay, can you set that up? Anybody else want to make a change while I'm?
Hi, this is Veronica. I'm so sorry, but I have to go.
Veronica, you're also leaving. Okay.
Yes, I'm very sorry, but thank you so much for the great session. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, I'm glad you did. So,
Hi,
We cannot have observers in some rooms.
Michelle, you can put me in Veronica's spot. I'll be here. I'm an observer, but I'm not required. I don't have to.
Who's me? Because I can't see. Is that OJ?
No,
it's
me,
Joseph.
Joseph.
Joe.
Yeah.
Okay. Joseph. So I'm moving you to seller and moving Deborah. Oops. Okay. Are you also keeping up with all the changes I'm doing there, Pooja?
Yes.
Okay, but I'm still going to talk to them for a bit. So I think now
Michelle, this is Shane. My 2-year-old has just woken up, and I'm here alone, so I'm gonna have to not be an active participant at the least.
Oh, you're an observer.
Okay.
So I think that should be fine.
She felt the tension. She wanted to join in. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. She can be an observer too. Anybody else? Okay, so we're going to first set up. So the 3 breakouts will first start off with all the sellers together, all the buyers together, and all the observers together. And we will get you you have like a little 1-page. It's a very short little paragraph. I think it's got like 4 sentences in there on what your objectives are and what you're trying to do. Now, because it's me, and you've probably heard, I love to talk about South Africa. I've spent half my life there. You know, one side is South African and one side is German. I can't remember off the top of my head which is which now. when you think of, I'm keeping this screen up now for you, Pooja, to set up the things, but if you can answer me, when you think of Germans in terms of cultural stereotypes, does not necessarily have to be true. And I spend a lot of time talking to my students about, and this is also in response to someone who said that they have a very, I can't remember how you said it, but a non-culturally diverse group. I asked them to think about, well, what do you see, in terms of in the news, in the movies, on TV, not saying that that is correct, but use that as your base, your starting base, if you're going into this naked, as in business, right? And then I'll share with you one of my faux pas trying to do that. I tried to read up this, I was working before the internet. But so you think about German and German culture, and if you're negotiating with a German, what are some of the things culturally that you would think about?
Rule-oriented.
Rule-oriented.
Yeah, highly structured.
Highly structured.
Formality of title, hair doctor, etc.
Formality of, what else?
Monochronemic.
Monochronemic.
And this is in terms of finance, sloppy for big finance. This is in the words of a banker, okay? Not me.
Okay.
He said, like, they do business, but they are not sophisticated financially.
Ah, interesting.
Precision.
Yeah. Precision. Anything else in terms of the German and cultural aspects that you would want to have in your frame of mind?
They have fun, but after business, there is no jokes in the middle.
No jokes in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in general, although I've seen a change in the younger folks, they tend to be a little bit less affectionate and warm. I like you very much, would be more typical than, aw.
Less affectionate. Yes. And there are always, when you think about these stereotypes, there's always going to be a group of people, certain people that are going to break these. This is just, to help us get in the frame of mind, either if we are role playing as a German, or we are role playing that we're going to observe, the German and South African dynamic, or we are the German, right? Now, South Africa. What do you think when you think of South African or African culture?
It's a composed of cultures, and therefore, they have a mix of elements of, from the African whole continent itself as a tribes, but at the same time, they bring to the backpack a combination of British and German and Netherlands. I think they tend to be kind of unique in this combination of like some sort of like compose, something in those lines.
Yes, there are 12 official tribes, many unofficial tribes and unofficial languages in South Africa. Just like you said, in terms of the European cultures, it's also a melange. So if you're dealing with a South African, you really would need to know the type of South African you're dealing with. So I would definitely agree with that. But that being said, there are some generic things on the continent, collective versus individual. Which would you put, South Africa towards, leaning?
Individual.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So I would have thought you would have said collective, but
that's because I'm ignorant of the culture. I just guessed 50-50.
That's absolutely fine. So that's one of the things that we would talk about, right? Is if you're thrown in as a young executive, and if I sound like I'm being very personal about this, I am. By the way, I can't see the chat, so I'm hoping someone else is managing that. Okay, I just opened it. But if you're thrown in as a young executive for a large multinational and you're moved to a country that is not your native country, you have to do some homework,
Mhm.
and your homework might not be right. And so, so one of the things I coach my students about is that, first you go by, what you hear or see, and it may not be right. Then you try to read up, and luckily now we have the internet. Back then I didn't, so I used tourist books, etc. And that's where you go. And then you have to just be prepared to be flexible on the spot, right? Because individuals don't necessarily follow their cultural upbringings anyway. It's just for background and preparation for the negotiation. Anything else about South Africa that you would think? What about formal versus informal? We talked about that.
I was going to say the appearance of being more laid back, especially relative to German, but I think that appearance masks a more intellectual framework, if I could put it that way. So they may appear laid back and easygoing, but at the same time, they're thinkers.
Okay. Yep.
I think it's such an interesting example of a country that you've chosen, Michelle, because like Carlos said, I think of it as such a mix of cultures as opposed to Germany. And so it's interesting to hear you say there are some dominant themes, because I would have said that those who are of Black African descent might have sort of the collective piece, the warmth, the conversationalist, the need to relate before getting down to business. Trust building would be important. Eating a meal together. And I would have said those who were of Dutch and British descent would still have European, perhaps more German-esque qualities. And then I would have said you have to throw in the historical piece where there's a lot of, at least in urban representatives, a lot of fear and mistrust of the other.
Yep.
And I don't know about this, Michelle, but at some point I hear that Black Africans from South Africa tend to be more related to what happened in Central Africa, while those that are not Black South Africans tend to have a vision more European in that sense. I disagree with that, but I don't know if it's because the tribal perception that some may have. I really don't know. I mean, that's what I hear once.
Carlos, I'm going to need you, I can elaborate on my experience for a few minutes before, just to also help the South Africans and help you for your negotiations. I need you to explain a little bit more, though, what you're saying in terms of the Black Africans and the tribal of Central Africa. I wasn't quite following what you were saying.
No, what I was thinking is that what I hear is that their perception is that they tend to share more things with the Africans from Central Africa compared to, I'm talking about Black South Africans, okay, compared to white South Africans. And I think this is what Sarah was saying, in the sense that there is more tribal component on them compared to the other ones that are not. So there's definitely some sort of like heritage effect on it compared to the other ones that are basically colony guys. Can we use that argument? Is that a valid one?
Look, I'm certainly going to go back and take this conversation to my husband and see what he says. And he's not representative of all Black South Africans either. But so I'll tell you what my opinion is on this. The one thing that was pretty interesting from my personal experience is that, I thought, it would be, Black South Africans with, the various tribes and white South Africans. It's not like that. So there is, just like you said, there are Afrikaners that are a melange of Dutch and French and, maybe Portuguese a little bit as well. There are the English, there are the Portuguese with a very distinct culture. We have a very distinct Jewish population in South Africa. So there are many white tribes. And and so how culturally, so this is not getting into that level, so I'm not teaching about South Africa in this, but just to answer your question, what I will say is that I found that there were, so the collective aspect, the hierarchy, it didn't matter, black, white, purple, green, there's a large Indian component as well in South Africa that are South African born Indians. And a very distinct culture there as well. So it is a melange of cultures, not too dissimilar, although people here in America sometimes, not to get political, will agree or disagree, not too dissimilar. We're a melange of cultures in the US as well, right? And so yes, you do need to consider that. But on a whole, in terms of the negotiation process, yes, getting to know people is important. Maybe if they are English and they are fresh from England, might be different than if they're third generation South African. If they're third generation, second generation South African, I think you can assume that, the building a bond and trust will be a lot more important than in the European or American sense of the word. Have I answered your question? Okay, I'm being told, hurry up. So, okay, I've given you enough about South Africa. I can talk about that anytime. Maybe I'll come to Jim's place, and anyone who wants to talk to me about it, my perspectives, I'm happy to do so. Are we ready?
Yes, so should I open the rooms for 7 minutes?
Open the rooms.
Okay. And I'm gonna go.
Okay, now Pooja, we're gonna, before you go, the others can start joining. Are we going to give them the link, or are we going to put in, we're going to go into the,
I'll go in each of the rooms and put them in.
Okay, so I don't need to worry about.
Yeah. Can you tell me where Deb was? I think she dropped and then joined, so.
Yes, I can. I put Deb as an observer, and that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess, if you're counting from top to bottom.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Which you come up with in 5 minutes. I usually give them 10, but that's fine.
That sounds so ominous. Does that do it on your guys too? Recording and process? Yeah.
Yes.
Like I should be very afraid.
It caught me off guard the first time.
We didn't close the deal, so we failed.
We don't know if you failed.
Pooja was tough on me.
Okay, can you see and hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
so mark 90 it is, okay?
Say what?
Nothing. Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, okay. Okay, you all can see the screen? Let's start. Mark and Pooja, did you get to a deal?
No, she was too tough.
Mark, you said 90, so should we go with 90?
Listen to her.
You agreed to 90? Okay, yeah. I agreed to 90. I didn't hear. I guess we got cut off soon. Okay.
Kevin and Sheldon?
Yes, we reached a deal, 95.
95, okay. Joseph and Darlene?
I was going to say we had introduced a couple elements to the negotiations as well in terms of who's paying for delivery and the insurance. Kevin's doing the insurance, I'm doing the delivery.
Okay, nice.
For us, Joe and Darlene, 75 euros.
75, okay. Are all these in euros, by the way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Suzanne and Carlos?
We didn't come to a conclusion. We're talking about the first 50 at maybe 115, 120 per jacket, and then we still had a ways to go.
Okay. And then Cindy and Kat?
We had 90.
90
euros and 50% payment up front, and then a remainder once I receive it.
With payment.
It was a key issue on Suzanne and I that we talk about partial payments upon shipping and then receiving, so more in the fashion of a letters of credit. So I think that's maybe the only difference that we incorporate.
Wow. I want to tell you, can you still hear me? I took the share screen off, but the one thing, so I took that that little grid from one of my classes and quickly took their names out and the things, and their scores were significantly lower in terms of the numbers. I always have a group that doesn't make a deal. I usually have someone tell me there's not enough information, and I usually my retort back is, in my real life experience working, in banking, I'm never given enough information either, and I still am thrown in the deep end. You do what you do, and you can't promise something that you can't deliver, but there may be some things that within your scope that you can promise. So when you were promising about the logistics and everything in a real life situation, it depends on what you can or can't, what you in your own responsibilities you could negotiate. Otherwise, you have to give that famous answer, I'll get back to you. In terms of international considerations in the role play, it was pretty much, in one way, very much a straightforward negotiation, that could have been within country, but I added the twist of the international cross-border. Did anyone use or consider that?
Oh, the Americans as a final consumer? Yes. I mean, I argued that my client was willing to compromise a little bit of quality.
Anyone else? So I think, I've used this in my international management class. We were very light on numbers. And so I sometimes they get a little scared because, I'm introducing this whole concept of foreign exchange and forcing them to do a little bit of a chat there about that. Okay, we're officially over time. Thank you. I love my colleagues that tell me to shut up. Anything else anyone would like to add before we leave each other?
It's been fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could you upload the both of those links to the two roles?
Yes, we can. Where are you going to upload them to the chat?
The chat, yeah.
Okay, we could do that for sure.
Or here's my email.
Oh, and by the way, sorry for the self-serving thing. I did upload to chat a short piece that I wrote a few years ago while I was at IMD that I give my MBA students. So it's a real short, how do you kind of jump on assignment abroad and what are some things you should be mindful of? So it's a quick read.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I came with a question that I still have, and that is the authenticity of the role play. I have done one for many years called the Mexico Contract from DRRC and DCRR, whatever it is. And it suddenly struck me that I felt kind of not respectful of people pretending to be Mexican. And it just made me really uncomfortable. I've never had anybody complain about it, but when I teach cross-cultural, I always, I use Jeannie's the difference in greeting behaviors between Japan and France. Have you seen that chart she has in her international negotiation book? And I use that, and I talk about bell curves and how, we talk about the center as the culture when there's really dispersion around that. I mean, you said the same thing yourself, Michelle, earlier. Does anybody else have misgivings about people pretending to be a different culture?
Hi, Cindy. Yeah, just to give you very quick, I agree with you, and I have the same trepidation. I use a alien context, so it's just like different planets negotiating, and they have their own set of rules. I think this is from Bruce Berry's negotiation book, so it's very widely available. My personal opinion is I wouldn't feel comfortable doing, as you mentioned, asking my predominantly Caucasian students to pretend to be
Yeah.
anything other than aliens, which they do a fairly good job at. It's more a little bit fun. So
We
just to throw
did
that
one
out
at
there.
OBTC years ago where people were plants. We were plants, and we happened to be in a room with a lot of plants, and people were picking up their plants, and that's who they were. And I think Jeannie also has one at DRC called Alpha Beta, and it's the alphans and the betans, and one is Japanese and one is American. But you can kind of figure that out too. But I will look for the intergalactic versions.
One analogous thing that I'll mention, and I've been teaching negotiation for more than 20 years, is I will usually randomly assign students to roles. So there'd be like a male and a female, and I won't, with regard to that. Or one I just started using that comes out of Kellogg is called Lovely Braids. And it's more of the African-American braiding experience. And one of the things that I have found personally, which just appeared in an article in the last year, and I'm blanking on the name, is that when a student is forced to play a gender or a culture that's not theirs, if framed and handled appropriately, it turns out that they gain greater empathy for that gender and that culture, because now they have had the experience of being, albeit role-playing, that gender or culture. But obviously, I agree with all of you, the care that must be taken, and what the assumptions are, and what we're asking, and the realism of that, and so on and so forth. But it does increase empathy.
Mm-hmm. Good to know. Thank you.
Oh, this is great. I think the rooms will close automatically in 2 minutes, but before that happened, I just want to thank you all for, so much engagement and participating wholeheartedly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Very good.
Thanks.
I put a link in there to that Alpha Beta / Bafa exercise that I use that quite a bit.
Yeah, I have participated in that. I've never run it myself, but thank you. That's a good reminder.